humans, it's just Martine, and welcome to the most diabolical idea one of my friends has ever given me. I can just feel myself standing on the precipice of a large mistake, and I'm ready to jump in. Here's what happened. It's the 17th of July, and today I asked my friends, hey, I need one more 12 TBRs video idea for this year. I would like it to be something involved with Kindle Clear Out. If you missed it, my Kindle library is absolutely out of control, and every 2 months I've been making a Kindle Clear Out video to try and solve that problem with little to show for it, I feel like. So I was like, 12 TBRs, so it's got to be something a bit special, but I would still like it to be a Kindle Clear Out episode. Give me your ideas. And immediately, my friend Ruby said, read until you get a 5-star. If you're at all familiar with my Kindle Clear Out series, you know this is quite an idea. Not in that it's a good one or easy to fulfill at all. The very opposite. It is just diabolical enough to make the perfect 12 TBRs video idea. Because I don't think I've ever given an owned Kindle book 5 stars. I just can't think of one. I cannot think of a singular one. Let's talk rules. There are like 167 days left in the year. I have to make a good faith effort to read books for this video, and that good faith effort needs to include that I am trying to find books that I will really like. There are, of course, books that will not count for this. Books that are purposefully set aside for any other video that I'm making this year will not count towards this video. That means any books that are already slotted to be 12 TBRs books. Any books that make their way into TBR crime episodes, any books from my other Kindle Clear Out episodes this year, none of those will count. So if, for some reason, I should find a 5-star owned Kindle book in that journey, they will not count for this. Here's the thing, I do not have high hopes for this project. I expect it to be a long video with very little success. Hence why the title of this video is something along the lines of, I read my own Kindle books until I find a 5-star, or the year ends, whichever comes first. Because frankly, even though there are several months in the year and I read a good number of books, I am not anticipating any luck in this endeavor. So either you are about to watch a video where I read own Kindle books and surprise, surprise, find that there is a hidden gem indeed among them, and that all of my Kindle reading is for something, the hope of one day finding another 5-star, or you're about to watch a very long, very sad video in which I read as many Kindle books as I can and find nothing, and the year just ends. I guess you'll have to stick around and find out which it will be. I have no idea. I'm so terrified of this idea, which I think is one reason it's perfect. Let's get to it. My first tactic to try and find this elusive 5-star book is to use a combination of things. One, I know that in general, the books that I pick for Amazon First Reads are of better quality than some of the random free books I got from other places, because some of the other free books have never met an editor in their life. Not all of them, but some of them. So Amazon First Reads, and also focusing on mood reads. So when I get an Amazon First Reads, it's usually because that sounds good to me right then. And so if I keep up with my Amazon First Reads for the rest of the year, theoretically, I would have a good chance of finding a 5-star book. Although I'm sitting here trying to think of an Amazon First Reads that I've ever given 5 stars, and nothing is coming to mind. Nevertheless, this is a starting tactic. And so far for this video, I've read 2 books. No 5-star yet, and I'm gonna try not to lose hope. The 2 books I read were my June and July First Reads picks, or at least one of them, because in July I got 2. I'll start with the June one, which was Woman on the Verge by Kim Hooper, and I'm giving it 4 stars. I almost gave it 4.5 stars, so I did really enjoy it, but at the end of the day, I gave it 4 stars. This is a contemporary fiction work that is honestly tackling something that I think more people need to be talking about, that society needs to be considering more, and that's the topic of maternal ambivalence. Maternal ambivalence is the set of really complicated emotions that a lot of mothers feel around motherhood, wherein they love their children, but also they are exhausted, they are overwhelmed, there's just too much. And so it's the simultaneous feeling of, I love my kids and I can't do this, I want to leave. And so we're following our main character. She is doing really, really unwell. She's not happy in her marriage. She's not happy in her position as a mother. She's a stay-at-home mom, not necessarily based on what she wanted, but because she was kind of forced into that situation. We're kind of seeing her break down. At the same time, her father is having a serious health decline. He gets diagnosed with this really rare disease that's incredibly quickly degenerative in nature. And so she's balancing all these complicated feelings about her parents from growing up and losing her father, while she's also balancing her feelings about motherhood and her exhaustion and stress. I'm obviously not a mom, so I can't speak to the accuracy of this, but I thought this was handled really wonderfully. I will say a content warning for like cheating in a marriage. I know some people really don't want to read about that in a book, and so I feel like that's just worth noting here. I think this covered a topic, and I haven't actually read another book, I think, that covers maternal ambivalence and makes it so viscerally real for the reader. Hats off to the author, but no 5-star yet. Then I read my first July pick, which was The Chemistry Test. It's a romance book about this girl. She actually has dysautonomia. I have dysautonomia too, so we had that in common. I don't think I've ever had the privilege of reading a main character who had a chronic illness that's very similar to mine. It has lots of differences. Hers is more severe, and she has EDS and POTS, and I have neurocardiogenic syncope, which is slightly different, but it's in the dysautonomia family. And so some of her comments about like her autonomic nervous system just not working were really relatable to me. I absolutely loved that about it. However, the writing style, the relationship in the book, the breakdown and communication between the characters, it was a 3-star read overall for me. I understood why the main characters were friends, but I didn't feel any chemistry between them. Ironic for a book called The Chemistry Test. Really, their breakdown and communication was abhorrent at a certain point. But I did love the disability representation. Again, I've never gotten to read a book with a character whose chronic illness is so close to mine. But my quest continues. It's actually August 1st, so I need to pick my next first reads. That will probably be one of the next books that I read for this video. But I also have some other tactics in mind, so we'll have to see what I come up with. I have one of the world's most confusing updates for you. So I read my next book for this. I chose Rules Between Roommates by C.L. Sharps because I've been in kind of a what in the Wattpad mood recently, and definitely a mood to read romance books. And this one, I don't know, the cover seemed cute. The idea of roommates.
And they were roommates.
Oh my god, they were roommates.
There was something there that drew me in. And I have so many different feelings about this book, so many conflicting feelings. When I first started reading it, like a couple chapters in, I was like, this is bad. There's no way this is getting more than like a 2.5 stars. Well, I'm here to report that I'm giving it 3 stars, which is shocking to past me. I don't know how to describe this. I was really invested in the main characters in this book and their relationship with one another and their evolving dynamic with one another. Like, as they started as roommates who hated each other, became friends, etc. I was really invested in that and thought it was super like adorable and wholesome. But this book was not good. I know this is independently published and not every indie author shells out the money to get an editor, and that's totally fair. If this book did not have an editor, it could have benefited from one. And if it did, then that editor owes this author money back. There were a couple of just like small typo mistake things, and that's one thing, but the beginning and the end were written in a way that felt completely different from the middle of the story. I think the part of the story where their dynamic was evolving was really where the author thrived, and she could have used some more support on the front and back ends of the story. The writing was not the greatest quality. I don't need it to be, but it was just like the weird tone of it and how certain things were handled that really knocked me back. Like, okay, so the premise of this story is this girl needs to move out of the place that she's living for a variety of reasons. Her new housing situation falls through at the last minute. She hears about something. She goes over to this guy. He's looking for a roommate. He's looking for a male roommate. He's like, absolutely not. You cannot live here. But then this girl who he had a one-night stand with comes over and is trying to be needy. And basically, because this other girl is there, it scares her off because he's like, oh, this is my girlfriend. And so he's like, ooh, I can use this to my advantage. So he lets her move in with this series of rules. The rules are ridiculous in general. They're like, we can't be in the same room at the same time. Like, if I'm in the living room, you can't be in the living room. But then even more ridiculous, the last rule is like, you can't fall for me. And he's just got this energy in the beginning that is so ick, so off-putting. And it really doesn't feel like him at all. And I understood more of their dynamic shift because he was a completely different person in the middle of the book than he was at the beginning. I don't know, something could have been done to make the beginning more believable. When we first met him, it was like, yeah, how are you possibly going to fall in love with this dude? Because obviously that's where this is going. And then when he changed, I was like, oh yeah, that's how. Okay, he's becoming your best friend. He's a really good dude. All of these things. That is not what we saw at the beginning. And I don't think it's because it was, purposefully obscured or something. I think it was the way that it was written. I think there is a way that you could do that where it's obvious to the reader that, like, he's not actually a jerk, but that was not obvious at all. He seemed like a huge jerk. I was like, why would you even want to live with this dude? I know you don't have anywhere else to live, but, like, flee, Those were some of my issues with it. But I did really like who the characters ended up being once they fell into the reality of themselves, if you will. Very good he falls first trope, which I do love. So anyway, 3 stars because I had a riot reading it, but like it was something else, So I guess we'll try again for this 5-star. Okay, the next book that I read for this was also along the lines of Amazon First Reads. So I read The First Witch of Boston. Past Martine, I'm going to stop you right there. Editing Martine here to say, this choice, I feel like, is such proof of my dedication to this video. Like, I was really trying to find a 5-star because this book went on to be nominated for the Goodreads Choice Awards. And when it was announced, a bunch of my friends were looking through, like, what they had read, and multiple ones of them were like, ooh, I'm adding this to my TBR. And I was like, I've read it. For this video, I was out here trying. Back to Past Martine. I at least enjoyed it. I'm giving it 4 stars, which is obviously a good rating, but also not a high enough rating to end this vlog. In this one, we are following the story of Margaret Jones, who is the first witch of Boston. She was like the first one executed in Boston for being a witch. And so we're just following the story of like people starting to believe she's a witch and then the trial. It's told in a way that I found really interesting because the author said she kind of wanted to do the inverse of this one trope. So the trope she was going for is like wife of a famous man. And so the inverse is that we're following the husband of a famous or infamous woman. Our main character in the story is not Margaret, it is her husband. And we start the book after the execution when he's leaving Boston, and then we like flash back to see how he got there. And definitely the themes of this story are like, we as a society will find any reason to persecute a smart woman, a woman who knows what she wants, a woman who expresses herself. Because Margaret is a healer, and she also, in this story at least, I don't know historically, but the character as written in this book is feisty. Like, she's got opinions about things and she shares them, which is great, but not in the context that she lives in. And so that's a very clear message of the story. Unfortunately, I feel like that message was muddled a bit by some of the execution, because there were some moments where it was like, is this magic? Is this not magic? Where there were like some supernatural things kind of happening that kind of muddled it, because if the story is about how like she's not a witch and we persecuted her anyway, then suggesting that there might be something supernatural is like messing with that message. I don't know. So that part just fell a bit flat for me. And unfortunately, that was used at some like pretty key moments in the book. So yeah, 4 stars, not a 5-star. I remain hopeful, I think. I think this tactic is working. Like, picking my Amazon First Reads is at least getting fairly good ratings compared to some other things. So I'll keep that up and then also sprinkle in some other things when I have the time. No 5-star yet. The next book I attempted for this vlog was Dating After the End of the World, which is, yes, another Amazon First Reads pick from this year. I'm trying not to make that every single book in this vlog, but it is going to be a lot of them just because of how the other 12 TBRs are falling right now. Because it's approaching the end of the year, and by golly, do I still have other 12 TBRs books left. So this is not the priority right now. Regardless, I tried Dating After the End of the World, which I thought was going to be a slam dunk for me because I was in a huge romance mood when I picked it up. It's a romance, or it's supposed to be, and somebody pitched it as like a Hallmark movie, but about zombies. And I was on board with that. The premise for this one is that we're following our main character. She's a doctor. She has this fiance. She's living her idyllic life. All of a sudden, this virus breaks out. It's basically a zombie apocalypse, and the world ends. And at first, her move is to go into hiding with her fiance, but that quickly does not work out because they get separated. fairly quickly, and she ends up going to her dad's place because he has been a doomsday prepper his whole life. So like he's ready for this, and she's always accused him of ruining her childhood by making her prepare for the end of the world, but now she's like, I gotta go there. So she's already feeling reluctant about getting her dad's help, and then she shows up there and her childhood bully slash enemy is there and is not going to leave anytime soon. And so it's an enemies to lovers, but make it a zombie apocalypse situation, which I thought sounded so fun. Unfortunately, this is one of those books that I really struggle with because I can't tell if it's trying to be campy or not. I think if you want to be campy, you have to be campy in earnest. It has to be clear that you're being campy. Otherwise, it's just cringy. So I gave this book 2.5 stars because I think it was maybe trying to be campy at points. Like it's a romance set during a zombie apocalypse, okay? But like sometimes I don't know, the vibe was weird. A couple of things about this. One, she starts with this fiance, they get separated quickly, and she's immediately just like, well, that relationship's over. Doesn't spend any time mourning that relationship at all. Like goes to her dad's place, and she's like, well, I gotta take off my ring so he doesn't know I had a fiance, because then he'll ask where he was. And that's the most angsty that she feels about the end of the relationship. She's like, bye, moving on. And so it made her fiance feel like a plot point, not something that made sense in her character motivations and like the dynamics of the story itself. So that was weird and frustrating. There were also lots of flashbacks to her childhood between her and her bully, and I hated those. They felt so cringy. I didn't feel like I was rooting for this couple by the end of the book. They just didn't make sense to me. I didn't care about them. Interestingly enough, the relationship took kind of a back seat to the apocalypse, which fair. If I was in the apocalypse, I'd be focusing on that too, but that's not really how it was sold, and so there was a lot more zombie fighting than I anticipated. And frankly, if I wanted that, I would just read World War Z. If I didn't want a good romance at all, there are plenty of other epic zombie books that I could read. And so I came into this hoping to get that plus the romance, and the romance fell so freaking flat. So that was a no from me. Yep, let's see how many more books we can squeeze into this video amongst all my other 12 TBRs reading. I am not holding out hope for a 5-star to trigger the end of this video. I am holding out for the end of the year to happen to end this video, to be so for real. Because originally, right, I was like, books not read specifically for this video aren't going to count for this video. Well, it doesn't matter if they would, because so far I've read like 60 owned ebooks this year, and not a one of them has been a 5-star. So this is just an exercise in futility. On to the next one. Once again, trying the tactic of reading an Amazon First Reads that I picked because I was excited about it, close to the time when I downloaded it. Once again, not finding a 5-star read. But this time, I tried More Than Nothing by Sophie Hamilton, which is a contemporary romance book, but also like romantic suspense-ish type thing. And I'm giving it 3.5 stars. We were following 2 people. One lives in this small town, and her family is like the quote-unquote trash of the town. They're responsible for a lot of the criminal goings-on. She still lives with them, but she's trying to distance herself from their name, but everybody in town treats her as if she's just like them. And then we have our male main character, who's the new chief of police. So we see where this is going. It felt to me like a combination of a Lucy Score book, like that one really popular Lucy Score series, because of the books that involve like police officers, especially chief of police in that series. But then also it felt like the last Elsie Silver book, is that one Hopeless, in the Chestnut Spring series, because of the situation where like our main female character is different from her family, but her family is like the criminal underground of the town. So it felt like a combination of those two things, which was kind of fun. Like I enjoyed both of those books/book series, and so the combination was not bad, which is why I picked it, like based off of the description. But I just felt like they lacked some chemistry. It didn't do anything crazy. Like it held my attention, but it wasn't anything super, super special that would give it higher than a 3.5 stars. Like 3.5 stars to me is I had fun, good time, not mad I read it, moving on. Kind of no thoughts, head empty most of the time. And that's exactly the way that I feel about this one. Not a 5-star. but we'll keep chugging. I'm here outside in a twist of events to talk to you about my next book, which, yes, is another Amazon First Reads, but we're not going to talk about that fact. We're here to talk about the book. And is it a 5-star? And is this vlog over? And the answer is, of course, no. No, it was not a 5-star. No, this video is not over. However, it was a 4-star, which I will take, because I feel like lately I've been reading so many 2.5-star books across all my various video projects that it was nice to enjoy a book for once. I read The Pursued by Corey Mead, which is a true crime book. When I saw this was an option for Amazon First Reads, I was a little taken aback because I feel like I hadn't seen a true crime book on offer there before. And so I was like, heck yeah, let's do it. I tend to enjoy true crime. I don't read it very often. It's actually one of my less read genres, but I do enjoy it when I read it, especially if either it's a case that I'm extremely familiar with and this is offering a new perspective. So I'm thinking of like The Stranger Beside Me by Anne Rule, or especially if it's a case I know absolutely nothing about. And what made this one really exciting to read was all the stuff I got to highlight to share with my students this spring in my legal psychology class. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this without spoilers, and then I'm going to warn you when I'm going to start talking about spoilers, because I have some things that I desperately want to say about this. Okay, so this particular book is about a case that I had never heard of before. It takes place in Wichita, Kansas, and involves this stalker that is called by the police the Poet, and this is a 3-year-long case. We're centering around this woman. I have already forgotten her name. I'm so sorry to her. She calls the police because there's this guy who starts stalking her. He starts calling her and being like, I know what happened to you when you were younger. She was attacked when she was younger. And he's like, I'm gonna tell everyone and all these things. And suddenly he starts appearing like around her house, following her around work and all of those things, and leaving things places and sending these really creepy notes that are all like weird twists on childhood poems. And what's concerning to the police is this is happening around the same area and in the same time frame as the BTK killer. They have some similarities between them, and so the police are really worried and they start investigating this case. Some people in other reviews were complaining about the writing style, and to me it felt like a regular crime writing style, very fact forward. And I would also say if they had a problem with this writing, that they really should not read Helter Skelter, because if you're talking about dry legal writing, that is, and it's 700 pages of that. So like this was way shorter and I feel like way more accessible, but also for a way less well-known and potentially less interesting case. I did not have trouble with the writing style. I generally found it interesting. I'm now going to start talking about spoilers. If you already know what happened in this case, or you don't care about being spoiled, and you want to hear my thoughts from like a legal and psychological perspective, then feel free to stick around. But if not, I'm going to put a spoiler warning on the screen and you can come back in a little bit when that disappears. Here's the thing. What ends up happening in this case is 3 years into this case, the chief of police takes over and he's like, there are some things in this that are really not right. He goes searching, and basically we find out that the poet is not this man at all, but instead is this woman, the one who is like, help this guy stalking me. So it's her doing all of these things to herself, basically. And even her husband does not know, but like she's writing all these letters, she's leaving these creepy things. She literally like hurt herself, and her brain convinced her somebody else attacked her, because she has this really intense dissociative fugue-like mental disorder, it turns out, based on some really intense childhood trauma. And so once police tell her like, no, we have proof it's you, you're doing these things, she really starts to become cognizant of those memories. But while she's going through it for these 3 years, her primary feelings are those of fear, believing somebody is actually after her. That's totally fine, and I'm actually not here to get into the psychology of dissociative fugues or anything like that. It's not my particular area of specialty. I'm actually here to talk about what this case tells us about police skepticism and how police treat survivors. For most of this book, I was kind of furious with the police because although they were doing what they could, some of them were having lingering doubts about both the woman who was reporting these instances and her husband. Granted, some things weren't particularly lining up, but that happens sometimes in crimes. They even like, one thing they didn't like was that when she told the story, small things would change about the story as she told it. But in fact, to me, that's generally a sign of pretty strong accuracy in survivor and witness continuous recall, because when you're continuously accessing that memory over and over again, different things are going to come up, things are going to change in that memory. And I'm not about to sit here and say that the opposite, pure consistency, is a sign of lying, because we don't actually have any reliable signs of lying. Like, people think they can tell when others are lying. You can't. The science has shown again and again we have about a 50% chance of doing that correctly, even police officers. But I am going to say a lot of times people who are lying have practiced their story, and so they are consistent over and over again. And so unfortunately, when we don't believe witnesses and survivors who have small inconsistencies, we're doing them and the way that brains naturally work a huge disservice. And so I was furious throughout this book with these police officers who were questioning the validity of her claims. But I also know for me, that's because a lot of the research that I do is on the side of survivors. And I know how much it hurts survivors when police do not believe what they are saying. It is actually a huge risk factor for secondary victimization, where you have trauma about the reporting process, because most people who go through something fear that they will not be believed. And when that comes true, it's incredibly traumatizing. So I know that I have that bias, typically in favor of more trauma-informed ways of talking to survivors. And now I don't think that we have to have one or the other. I think there's a place for healthy skepticism and investigation and a kind way to approach survivors all at the very same time. And to be fair, I feel like the police officers in this case did that. For the most part, they believed this woman and what she was going through, and they believed the feelings that she was feeling. They did everything they could, using a lot of time, energy, and money to make sure she felt as safe as possible. And when they brought her in to confront her about the fact that she was doing those things, they seemed to do it really kindly, at least the way it was reported in this book. They emphasized to her that they knew she was sick, that they wanted her to get help, that they were not against her, etc. And at first I worried that they were trying to trick her into giving up her Miranda rights when they were doing that. But no, they were genuine about that. They really did just want to help her, because they'd spent the last 3 years seeing her suffering intensely out of the fear that she was feeling in this case, and they just wanted it to be over for their sake and for hers. So I respect the officers in this case immensely for that. I do think, though, it brings up an important conversation that there are instances like this that happen that make officers skeptical. And as officers continue in their career and they see these things more and more, because it does happen, they get more and more skeptical when people come in to report crimes. And that's when the way that they start treating people who are coming in as witnesses and survivors changes negatively. And so I think it's important for all parties to remember that although this happens and you have to have some healthy skepticism, that should not in any way change the way that you interact with this person who comes in visibly suffering. I cannot even imagine how exhausting it is for officers that see things like this every day. I mean, obviously this is a really intense case of it, but people do lie about crimes all the time, especially to protect themselves from something else. But it is also so intensely hurtful to survivors when they come in and they have the courage to finally make a report about something and then they're not believed visibly. Like, they can feel it that they're not being believed. And so the science has to work on creating a better way for police officers to interact with survivors, even if they are lying about something, so that we can be trauma-informed in the way we're discussing things, but so that we also have room for some healthy skepticism that maybe the survivor doesn't need to feel all of, you know? Because some police officers can be very forthright about the fact that they do not believe survivors. And again, that's hurtful to survivors. I understand where those officers are coming from. They've got experience to back up that feeling. But at the end of the day, these are people, and we need to find a better way to help them. It's unfair to believe that police officers can do this without scientists supporting that quest. So I completely realize that it is on researchers and psychologists to find the way that works for both sides, so that when cases like this happen, police have safe ways to move forward in ways that are helpful to the survivor, but also helpful to the investigators. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I thought about so many things in this book, and I enjoyed it, but I think many of the reasons I enjoyed it are not particularly going to be reasons other people enjoyed it. So it is what it is. But overall, I had a good time with this one. We didn't find my 5-star. I'm not sure that we're going to, right? It's mid-December, and I am not holding out much hope, but I will keep reading. It's December 30th, and for the past couple days, I've been throwing a Hail Mary pass down the field to try and get this 5-star. My next pick, I really thought I did everything right with, and that honestly makes the result so much more frustrating. I picked a book that I downloaded this year, not from Amazon First Reads. It is the only book that I downloaded outside of Amazon First Reads this year. The only one that goes to my own Kindle library that's not like an ARC or anything like that. It's just, I decided I wanted to read this book. I had the option to get it. I think it was free. It might have been 99 cents, but I'm pretty sure it was free. and I downloaded it because I'd wanted to read it for years. It's not available on Kindle Unlimited. Some of my past libraries haven't had access to it. This was my time. I also thought this was a for sure win because it's a honestly cult classic 2010s queer contemporary story series. And one of my good friends who has given me a 5-star recommendation before, like gave me a book recommendation, I gave it 5 stars, has given this book 5 stars. So I was like, now's the time. So I spent the past couple of days reading The Foxhole Court, and I did not find a 5-star, so this is not quite a victory. On the other hand, it's not like I hated this book. It wasn't a Hail Mary pass that landed in like an interception, you know? I don't know why I keep talking about football. Sports. This book is making me think about sports, even though it's about a completely fake made up sport. I'm giving this book 4.5 stars. Now, there are some disclaimers about this 4.5 stars. I don't want you to think that the writing is good because I've given it 4.5 stars, which seems weird because 4.5 stars is a very high rating. The writing is not particularly good. In some points, I would say the writing is bad. For me, my enjoyment of this book was not about the writing. It was not about the accuracy of anything in the book. It was vibes only, specifically the vibe of intrigue and like how much a book lives in my head rent free. It has been a while, I feel like, since a book has lived in my head rent free and has made me go like, and I honestly love that feeling. I especially love when characters are interesting to me, and these characters were fascinating. 4.5 stars, not because it was a perfect book. Clearly, I didn't give it 5 stars, but because I was invested. So invested that last night I shelled out $4 and downloaded the rest of the series. That's invested. We're following this young man. His name is Neil, and he's a senior in high school. He plays the sport Exy, which the author completely made up, but it's a cross between lacrosse and ice hockey. Exy. Now, a lot of people in the reviews complain that this author clearly knows nothing about sports because the way that she wrote this new sport was just not good. Luckily, I know very little about sports, so that did not bother me. So our main character, Neil, he plays Exy. He gets this opportunity to go and sign with an NCAA Exy team and play at college the following year. Except he's recruited to this really weird team, the Palmetto Foxes, who are a band of misfits. They're the worst team in the division. They're also the smallest team in the division. Basically, to be recruited to the team, your life has to be a hot mess disaster zone. So our main character is recruited because his life sure is a hot mess disaster zone. Not that the coach knows fully what's going on, but he's on the run from his father, who's nicknamed the Butcher. His mom is dead, and he's been fleeing for the past 8 years. And what's scary to him about this opportunity is that the star player for the Foxes knew him when he was younger. And he doesn't know if that player recognizes him now. But their families have connections. Dangerous, bad connections. And so it's this weird, like, sport mafia situation where every single one of the characters has something deeply wrong with their brain, which leads me to a good point, which is the mental health representation in this book. Not at all accurate. Most of the reviews specifically mention that, and so I won't harp on about it too long. I will say last night at dinner I was talking about this book with my family because I was invested, and I was like, I can't decide if the author was using these terms colloquially or if she meant them medically, because she had used the words psychotic and psychopath to describe the very same character, and now those things colloquially have been taken to mean similar things, as in a person is just completely unhinged, but medically they are two different things, and I couldn't decide which she meant. I was trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, but everything else about the mental health representation in this book suggests she meant them medically and thought they were interchangeable. Now, granted, you could probably have a person who was having a psychotic break and they also happen to be a psychopath. I don't think there's any rule against that, but I don't think that was the case in this book, namely because the person that they called psychotic didn't seem at all like he was experiencing psychosis. His antipsychotic medication was not a real and normal antipsychotic medication. Everything about it was just not real. But here's the thing. If you read this book and you're willing to suspend every bit of disbelief you have in your back pocket, you can enjoy this book. I also just want to give a warning that the characters in this book do and say terrible things. And so there are some things that are like not appropriate for people to say. There are slurs used that you should not be using. I'm not condoning the behavior of these characters in this book because there is something seriously wrong with them. For me, when I read characters, I don't need them to be great people. I need them to be interesting. These characters were interesting. Do not do the things that they did. Do not. Do not read this and think it is okay. That is my disclaimer. The writing is confusing at times. It's very info dumpy, and so the finer details of this, I do not understand. But in general, I was following the story from the get-go, which for me nowadays feels like a big thing. I feel like my reading comprehension has been awful lately. So the fact that I knew what was happening, good sign. And this really brought me back to 2013 when it was first published because it reads like when it was from. And I won't lie, I was a tween and teenager in those years reading terrible writing online. And so this hit with me. You know, this connected. It felt like something I would have eaten up as a child. Granted, I wouldn't want my younger self to have read this because all the characters were so messed up in this book, but it is the type of thing that I would have gobbled down. And so I sure gobbled it down right now. Do I recommend this book to anyone? I don't know about that. But as for me, I will be continuing the series because there is nothing more intriguing in a book to me than weird characters that I find interesting. And we have a whole cast of characters I find interesting in this series. I literally started the second book last night. That being said, I do not think I'm going to finish the second book before the end of the year. It's longer than the first book, and I have so much editing to do. I'm very behind on editing for 12 TBRs. So I think this was my final book for the vlog, which is really unfortunate because it's 4.5 stars, not 5 stars. So the end of the year is signaling the close of this video, not a 5-star book. That said, I feel like we ended on a good note. Also, for reference, I don't think that reading the second book would be a good tactic to get a 5-star because I don't think it will be a 5-star. Just clarifying that because I don't think the writing's gonna get any better, and I just feel like with all of those things, I had to take off at least some points. Intrigue got it 4.5 stars. Everything else was that gap in the 0.5 stars. So I don't think the second book will be 5 stars. Otherwise, I might try to rush it for this vlog, but I don't think it's going to happen. So I'm going to focus on editing instead, which unfortunately means that I did not find a 5-star book in this video. I had some greater successes than others, right? Got a 4.5 stars, got some 4 stars. Then I had some other books that I read. After finishing The Foxhole Court last night, I have read a total of 72 owned ebooks this year. Not a one of them was a 5-star read. And so even though only a couple of those were actually reviewed in this video, the message is the same. Every owned ebook that I read this year would have prolonged this video. Just be glad this video is not 72 books long. With that being said, I'm going to end out this year. Happy New Year. You're seeing this on the 1st if you're watching it the day it goes up. Hope you have a great 2026. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up and comment down below. Do you have any ideas about how I could possibly find a 5-star owned ebook in the future from my existing library? Because I don't hold out much hope, but I'd be curious to know what your tactics would be if you were given the same challenge. And subscribe for more bookish and college lifestyle content. And until next time, bye humans, bye!